Thank you for making time to be here. Look, it's like old home week, isn't it?
I'm noticing, yeah, this is
like
lots of friends.
It's like a special session. We put the band back together for 1 hour, right? All the important people back in the room. I want to talk about the speaker's race, but before we do, given the events of yesterday, you're running for a leadership position, Mr. Chairman, so lead. Is there nothing from a policy standpoint that we can do in response to an event like yesterday in the legislature or anywhere else? Is it just thoughts and prayers, which are fine, but is there anything else we can do or should be doing?
Yeah, well, thank you for bringing that up, because I think that is the issue that is on the forefront of everybody's mind right now.
Yeah.
It's one that just pulls at your heartstrings. I clearly remember feeling the same way with the Sandy Hook Elementary catastrophe that occurred with that and that killing. You know, these are things that remind us how fleeting and fragile life really is, and what are the things that we can do from our perspective. There has been really the issue of, do we address it from a mental health point of view? Do we address it from a gun control point of view? You know, that is going to be a discussion that's going to go on for probably, you know, many, many years to come. What we do know is that anybody who would go in to a place of faith on a quiet Sunday morning and literally kills 26 people with what sounds like a semi-automatic weapon, has a mental derangement. There's no doubt about that. Now, whether that's something that can be picked up or not, or recognized, is another question. And in today's, you know, world of social media and things like that, that starts to be now where investigators go immediately to say, was there a way that we could have picked this up? Yeah. Was there a way we could have picked up, you know, the incident in New York City, the incident in Las Vegas? You know, I mean, we've just had a series of these on top of the ones that already occurred that I think certainly from a lawmaker's point of view, we need to step back and look at what are the things that from a rational policy point of view can we do in order to try to get our arms around that. And as you know, I've been a big proponent of dealing with mental health and having the state take a bigger and bigger role in that. Right. And we've done that. We have funded significant resources, especially in the last session. Even when we were tight on money, we put lots of money into mental health resources out there, and with the expectation that we will, you know, probably circumvent, intervene some of these things that do happen like that. I do think that we need to take a better look at what goes on in social media, because
what did social media have to do with this incident, Mr.
Yeah, I think what you see is, and I think the details yet to come out on this one, you know, but, you know, are there things that happen that are public on social media, on Facebook, and all these things that could have been picked up? I think there were things on the one who happened in New York City. I think the early signs are things that this individual was promoting in terms of, you know, this incident that he carried out.
But from your perspective, Mr. Chairman, from your perspective, nothing related to gun policy, background checks, nothing that is in the typical bucket of things that come up at a moment like this that you think our legislature, or just generally speaking, we as a society need to address?
I'm not afraid of having that conversation, and I think that the people that have been impacted by this deserve that conversation by its leaders. Everybody has their own opinions on this. It's a very, very you know, hot topic. It's pretty radioactive in some cases, and I think the public deserves to have the conversation. Where it goes is a conversation that I think, as a House leader, we need to let that conversation occur.
Okay. So you're running for Speaker. There are two reactions: oh, good, he wants to be Speaker, or oh, God, he wants to be Speaker. I'm tempted to ask you why you want this job.
Yeah, it's thank you for that. And what I would say is that you know, it's a lot of soul searching, but it's a lot of soul searching in a fairly short time. And as you know, you pointed out, I've been 6 terms in the House this time. You know, I've been fortunate to serve in leadership roles under Speaker Strauss, and I've been very honored and privileged to do that, and most recently with the Appropriations Committee. And
you know that no Appropriations Committee chairman has ever been Speaker.
It's time to change that.
Is that right?
That's right, yeah. Exactly.
I guess there has to be a first theoretically. Right.
That's right.
Were you surprised by his decision?
Oh, I was caught totally flat-footed.
You were?
Yes,
because you seemed to announce like 1 second later. You didn't seem to. You didn't seem to have been caught.
Well, when I said
flat-footed.
we had some intense soul searching, I didn't tell you how long we had it,
Right.
you know, but
Long enough to go into your draft folder, apparently.
I have a very resourceful staff, that's all I can say. You know? Sometimes my staff see me doing things that sometimes I don't even see myself doing, you know, but
you were surprised. You did not get
I was
a heads
totally
up.
surprised. No. Maybe 5 minutes, we got the heads up from some of our staff contacts that this was going to happen. But what that led to, Evan, was very quickly just a sense of, okay, what happens now?
Right.
And it's almost like, as the author of the book Blink says, you know, sometimes it's that initial response that you get to a circumstance that's totally unexpected is actually the response that you should take or would have taken had you even thought about it a little bit more. And in fact, have you stopped
you had no doubt. That means you had no doubt at all this was the right decision to do, to get in this race.
The initial gut feeling I had was, we need to get in this. We need to get in this race.
Right.
Even though we hadn't really been talking about that a lot among ourselves.
And you would not have run against Speaker Strauss.
Oh, absolutely not.
As your colleague Chairman King had decided to do.
Absolutely not.
Before Speaker Strauss.
No, I was totally committed to the Speaker's team, and as the Appropriations Chair, I think that's a reflection of the confidence he had in me and my team in order to leading that process. And so but you know, the world, in this small world that we live in, related to this kind of thing, you know, the earth shook on that announcement because all of us had expected the Speaker to, you know, stay, run again, and very likely be elected again.
He'd given we'll come to whether he would have won again in a second, but he had given every indication that he was intending to run again. So it really did seem to be this abrupt reversal. Although there's of course more to the story than that.
Yeah, so that was certainly the you know, the world that we were living in terms of this. But we felt that, you know, look, we've sort of considered that, you know, in the event that a speakership opportunity come up, would we be considered somebody that could run for that and effectively lead the House? Yeah, we had those conversations. Probably 149 other people had those conversations, frankly.
Right.
You know, but the moment was there. The opportunity was there. There is going to only be one person that immediately announces after the Speaker declares that he's not going to run. Yeah. And we said, why should that not be us? And if it's not us, who is it going to be? And again, this is all within a few minutes following that this conversation and back and forth went on, and very quickly my staff was able to, you know, complete the legal work that has to be done to formally announce, and then put a press release out.
Now, of course, there has to be a rationale as well as a process to get in a Speaker's race. And so my question to you is, are you running to preserve something, or are you running to fix something as it related to the last 5 terms of Speaker Strauss? How should we regard your candidacy and your view of the speakership against the backdrop of what has preceded it?
Right. I think there are things that can be improved upon, and they probably, frankly, will only be improved upon by virtue of having a new Speaker in place. The rancor, I think, between our top 3 leaders was intense. I was on the sidelines of that for the most part, but clearly it was something that I think affected our ability to you know, accomplish certain things. And I'm not going to point fingers at who wouldn't talk to who at any given time. The point is that
But if you remove Strauss from it and you assume that Patrick and Abbott are coming back, how are you not pointing fingers at Strauss? I mean, if the only difference in the rancor from this time to next time is Strauss not being there, then how is that not an indictment of the Speaker's?
Oh, I don't think it is at all. I think that the Speaker, you know, had his position. The Lieutenant Governor had his position. The Governor was in between a lot of this stuff, you know, and I think that it was in my 6 terms, the political rancor and what I would call the dysfunction that sort of played out as a consequence of that was as intense as I've ever seen. Yeah. And I'm not pointing a finger at any one person. Obviously, I'm a very loyal Strauss supporter and member of his team. I saw it from his side and through his lenses largely.
Right. But you think the relationship among and between can be improved?
Absolutely. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Well, that's essentially lateral or upstream. What about downstream? Do you think that the Speaker needed to improve the way he worked with the body, with the members? And is that something that you'd be looking to do differently, to fix or to change?
Well, I think the purpose of the House is to allow the committees and the process to work. And I think there were members who felt that they weren't given a fair shake in terms of some of the bills that were important to them and their constituents. I do think that the Speaker had a very, very intense, you know, loyalty to the process, if you will. In other words, He tried to take himself out of, some of the political activities that would go on, and said, let the process work. Let the committee chairman, determine whether a bill needs to be heard or not. Let the committee as a whole determine whether a bill moves forward. Let the calendars committee do its thing.
So when he says, Mr. Chairman, when the Speaker said over the years, I lead the House by the will of the members, you take him at that? Do you think he actually did that?
Oh, absolutely.
No agenda?
Absolutely. No, it would be inhuman for somebody to not have some amount of an agenda. But I think his agenda was always in the sense of, what's the right place for the state to be in this? And so, some of the more high-profile bills that got pretty red hot, I think, he had a very strong feeling about some of those things. A lot of us did, but I do think that the integrity of the process was utmost importance in his mind.
But there seems to be, Mr. Chairman, a contradiction. So on the one hand, I lead the House by the will of the members. On the other hand, when I don't like a bill, I'm going to put my thumb on the scale and forget the will of the members. I mean, that is, in some respects, an inelegant critique of the Speaker's tenure. This is the more elegant critique, and I'll credit Phil King here in his announcement statement on September 25th. The role of the presiding officer is not to control the House, but rather to facilitate, assist, and empower all members to represent their districts, promote their ideas, and implement their policies. He does not call out Speaker Strauss in that statement or anywhere else in his announcement of his candidacy. But the clear implication is that Speaker Strauss controlled the process, controlled legislation, and ultimately kept certain things from making their way through. I'm wondering if you agree with it.
Well, I think that there are certainly those opportunities within the Speaker's office to impact the progress of a bill through what is a very, very difficult process in terms of ultimately getting to the governor's desk or getting over to the Senate and so forth.
Is that the Speaker's job? Is it the Speaker's job to decide, I don't like these bills, therefore I'm going to impact the process that would get them to the floor?
Right. I think that it's the Speaker's job to make sure that there's integrity to the process.
What does that mean?
That means that, bills come in, they're important to the member. We need to be sure that they have some sense of importance to the body.
Yep.
They get referred in a timely fashion, and you let the committees, of which the Speaker has total, authority over who's on those committees and who chairs those committees,
right,
and let that process work. I think that's what we're set up to do under the current situation that we have. So,
would that be comforting to the conservative critics of the Speaker who said on the one hand that a bill to provide greater parental choice in public education, vouchers or some version of that, it goes to the Public Education Committee, and then Dan Huberty, in advance of that bill even being filed, sits on the stage with me and says, it's dead before it even arrives, don't bother sending it to me. Or the bathroom bill, would Ron Simmons say that when that bill gets referred to State Affairs, that somehow the process is working properly for that bill, which has more than enough co-authors to pass the bill on the floor, including you? Doesn't even get out of the State Affairs Committee because Byron Cook and the Speaker imply or say explicitly that they don't want that bill to get out of the committee.
Yeah, well,
is that proper?
I think that it's clearly within the purview of the chairman of the committee.
But who appoints the chairman?
Exactly, well, the Speaker does.
Yeah.
Okay, and so the Speaker does exert some influence, his or her political will in terms of the appointment process. And
yeah,
that includes not just the chairman, it includes the members of the committee. That has been that way, since, the beginning of time. Development.
No one should be surprised
exactly.
by
Nobody
that.
should be surprised by that.
Right.
And a speaker should not be hesitant to let that process work, and then let it play out the way it plays out, and that's the way I feel about it. That's certainly the way I have engaged the process. When it comes to calendars, I've been the beneficiary and I've been the victim of the calendars committee and stuff,
Yeah.
and that's considered one of the main places as to whether you get a bill that ultimately gets to the floor for consideration. So the process works. It may not always work the way you want it to work in terms of what you're trying to promote and
right,
push forward, but it does work.
I guess I'm trying to understand from the perspective of somebody who might have found Speaker Strauss's tenure wanting, and they're considering Chairman Zerwas potentially as a speaker. Speaker Strauss was criticized by people who supported school choice, for instance, for appointing in Jimmy Don Aycock and then Dan Huberty two members who were clearly opposed to school choice, and so from their perspective, they don't believe their stuff got a fair shake. Are you committed to appointing people whose views align with yours personally, even if others in the body may want something to be viewed differently? I guess I'm trying to get at what your theory of the case is here, as it relates to committee chairman and as it relates to the flow of legislation.
Well, I think we all bring different skills and talents to the body. And I think that if we look at who the chairmen are, they bring different skills to that body in order to help effectively deal with the policy, very difficult policy decisions in those areas. Dan Huberty is eminently qualified to serve in that role. Having served on the Public Ed Committee, having served as a school board member, he really brings a very, very deep portfolio.
I don't think anybody questions his qualifications, but he did have a point of view going in the door, and so
we all do.
Right,
but we all do.
But people who had a perspective on that legislation, Mr. Chairman, thought when he was appointed, well, this is the thumb on the scale. Are you going to have a thumb on the scale?
Well, I'm going to appoint chairman that I think can effectively lead the House on some very difficult policy issues. They don't come to us unless they're difficult issues to begin with, you know. But my position would be to appoint qualified chairman that can effectively run the meetings and will hear legislation that's important to the body as a whole.
Let me ask it more specifically because I'm doing a bad job. I'm bonking. I'm hitting and I'm bonking. It's like playing handball today. You voted against vouchers.
I did, yes.
Okay, so can I take from that you're going to appoint an anti-voucher chair of public education if you're speaker?
Not necessarily, but that is definitely, you're accurate in my position that I voted against school vouchers. I don't think that that's the solution to our public education, and I'll stand and defend that not only from my own political philosophy, but that's my district.
But it would be strange if you were a voucher opponent for you to appoint somebody who is pro-voucher as the chair of public education, wouldn't it?
I think it'd be unusual, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
okay. I mentioned that you were a co-author of the bathroom legislation, the Ron Simmons bill.
Correct.
Okay, so do I take from that you're going to appoint a state affairs chairman who would be willing to hear and pass that bill out of committee and send it to the floor where, as we know, based on the number of co-authors, it has more than enough to pass?
Right, not necessarily. I mean, I think there's a lot more to state affairs than something known as the bathroom bill, frankly.
Right.
Okay, so that's not necessarily what I would do. That wouldn't necessarily be a singular issue that would drive me to appoint somebody chair of state affairs because we can get a fair hearing on a bathroom bill.
You understand, Mr. Chairman, that is one thing of a number of things that people are looking to the speaker candidates to telegraph their perspective on, as that is likely, based on the Lieutenant Governor's statements since the session, that is likely to come back up.
Well, I don't know if I agree with you on that. One of the more recent statements I heard from the Lieutenant Governor was that we've won this issue because we brought it up.
Right.
And therefore, is there any reason to talk about it anymore? So, you know, I don't know.
You believe that the Lieutenant Governor is satisfied for having started the conversation?
I didn't make the comment. He did, you know, so I mean.
You may be the only one who thinks it's not coming back.
No, I'm not saying it's not coming back. But that comment was made, at least as it was published.
Right.
I don't understand, you know, how he came to that conclusion, but he did, you know, and that's for him to
And if that
decide.
legislation or any other were to come back in the next session, you would be willing to give it a fair shake as Speaker?
I'm not afraid of having that brought up as an issue and to play out what are all the ramifications.
Will anybody be able to say, last point on this, will anybody be able to say next session, if you're Speaker, as they said this session regarding the bathroom bill, don't worry, John will kill it?
My perspective is, as Speaker, is to let the process work. The process is highly effective at killing bills beyond what John Zerwas as a Speaker could do. And again, I've been the victim of that more than once. So,
Mr. Chairman, are you a conservative?
Absolutely.
Well, you know that word has been redefined over the last couple of years. What we once thought of as conservative is now seen by some people as not conservative. I mean, I was interested when the Speaker announced he was stepping down. Jonathan Tylov had a story in the American Statesman, the headline of which was Speaker Strauss' successor likely to cut a more conservative figure. That was the headline on the American Statesman story. And the art accompanying the story was a picture of you. And I looked at it and I thought, this is interesting. I know that they're running his picture because he happened to announce for Speaker that day, but I also wonder if some people who view Strauss as not having been sufficiently conservative consider Chairman Zerwas to be more conservative than Speaker Strauss. Do you consider yourself to be more conservative than the Speaker?
You know, that's a hard one for me to answer. I certainly, a lot of my political positions line up with the Speaker. There's no doubt, you know, if you just look at my votes and where I've carried myself, you know.
Is there any daylight between you on any significant issues that you could name?
Not anything that just comes top of mind right now.
So if somebody did not like Speaker Strauss as Speaker and they're considering you as Speaker, why would they like you better?
I think what they want, they would like the fact that there would be a fresh person in there that's going to hold the integrity of the process very sacred. regardless of my political views.
Yeah.
Again, I think that.
But again, you believed he held the integrity of the process sacred, don't you? You said that a couple of minutes ago.
I think he did. In the world that I lived in, which was largely an appropriations world,
Yeah.
I would have to say that the only bill that ultimately we have to pass as a legislature, the process worked.
Yeah.
I didn't like everything that happened in the process, but the process worked.
Do you think you're a conservative enough speaker, or would be a conservative enough speaker, Mr. Chairman, for the politics of Texas now?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, there's quite a spectrum. We all know that. Some people have even described it as a civil war between what you might call mainstream, more pragmatic, pro-business, pro-local control conservative Republicans versus social movement conservatives, which are looking more at some of the social
You put yourself in the former camp.
Well, I come here absolutely to address issues that I think that have major importance to the state of Texas that are going to allow us to make Texas a better place for my children and grandchildren. And so, from my world where I live in and in my district, the things that resonate most out there are the things that fall within the mainstream category. It doesn't mean they don't have an opinion about things like the bathroom bill and some of the other social bills. They do, but
in fact, your positions on many of the social issues, movement issues. I mean, let's put the bathroom bill just to the side for a moment. Although you are a co-author on the Simmons bill, I understand you to be as conservative in the sense that you're pro-life, right?
Absolutely.
You kind of go down, tick off the list of issues.
Right.
I'm not aware of any deviance from what are traditionally the conservative positions on social issues.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Yeah.
But if I look, and I will be part of those conversations, and I think they are very important parts of the conversation of the legislature for all members, but more for some members than for others. And so what I look at it is that we need to be sure that every member that comes up here, by the will of 170,000 people in the district they live in, are going to bring issues that are of importance to that district, and therefore they may have importance to the state of Texas. The opportunity needs to be there for those individuals, whether it resonates with me or not, have the opportunity to use the system for the purpose that it was created, and then therefore to determine whether what's happening over here in John Zerwas District 28 is really something that needs to happen across the entire state.
And if there are enough votes for it in the full House, then so be it.
Let it be. It's a long, complicated process.
Right.
It's very frustrating at times, but it's the best thing we have going.
Do you share the Speaker's concern about the business environment or the business climate in Texas, the concern that led him to appoint this committee on competitiveness? Because the Lieutenant Governor has told our reporter, at least, I don't see why we need anything like this. I wonder, are you with the Speaker or the Lieutenant Governor on that?
Oh, I'm totally with the Speaker on this, yes. I mean, how can you be against taking a deep dive and hard look at the competitiveness of Texas for our future generations?
Well, the implication for the Lieutenant Governor is that we don't have a problem we need to solve.
Well, you could say that about some other things too, but...
Would you like to be specific?
I will say this, that part of the conversation last session, and continues to be, is, are some of the issues that we're talking about, potentially damaging the competitiveness of Texas.
Now I have to ask you to be specific. Come on, tell me what you're talking about. Give me an example of something that we're talking about that potentially damages Texas. Can't be that bill that you co-authored.
Well, let's put that out there. That bill, brought the business community out, very strong, especially in the special session, to say, we have great concerns about this bill even being talked about in the state of Texas because of what we feel it will do to our companies and our ability to attract talent and our ability to really headquarter and do work in the state of Texas.
Is that a legitimate point of view by business?
Well, when the CEOs of some of these most prominent companies come out, as I say, you have to step up and pay attention to that. And whether, put a group together, have them do a deep dive into it. That's what we do in the interim. It's what we do in our committee. That's what this select committee can do. And let's talk about it and figure it out. If it's a non-issue, then hey, let it bubble up that it's a non-issue.
But it's worth the conversation.
It is worth the conversation. And again, I heard from many a business entity out there, chambers of commerce, the tourism industry, the big tech companies, that they had concerns about this.
Yeah.
And they registered them louder in the special than they did in the regular session.
But you were for the bill,
despite
despite those concerns.
Yeah, but I would say that was during the regular session.
What changed?
I think what has changed is the whole conversation that has really, I think, continued to bubble up.
So the business community actually brought you from the yes camp to maybe back to the middle.
The camp that, let's talk about this,
Right.
because if we're going to, one, address something that, in my opinion, really is not a problem, what are the ripple effects of that going to be? And we're going to have a big problem.
I guess I'm just confused from the regular to the special. How did it become less of a problem?
In the special session, I think the business community came out very strong
And
voice.
for you, that was the tipping point.
That was definitely a tipping point. And so I chose not to sign on to any bathroom bills at that point. The Simmons bill was one that a lot of us had talked about, and we said we thought that there was a pretty good, strong coalition of people that could address what the real issue was.
Yeah.
And people had comfort of being on that. But as the special session came around, and really I think the business community came out in force and at the highest level, I think you have to step back and say, we need to take a look at this.
The business community has been activated on a bunch of issues, not just this one, on education and on immigration, to name two others. So should the legislature take the similar perspective on the bathroom bill that they do on those issues and actually begin to say, wait a minute, do we need to be having a different conversation on immigration and education based on the business communities?
I don't think the business community drives everything that we do, but it is an incredibly important part of what the future of Texas is going to look like.
Yeah.
And for my children and grandchildren, I want the future of Texas to be as prosperous and as inviting as it is for me today.
So you'll listen at least?
Absolutely. I'll listen to all sides of it. That's the one thing about, especially the practice I have, the world that I live in. The first thing you got to do is listen.
Yeah.
And if you listen hard and you listen intently, you're going to figure out what the issue is and figure out what the problem is very quickly.
You mentioned the social conservatives or the movement conservatives as one end of the party, sometimes at odds with the end of the party that you put yourself in, and the speaker certainly would put himself in. What do you do about the Freedom Caucus? So this was 12 folks. The numbers are likely to be greater in the next session. How much greater, we don't know. But in many respects, business of this last legislature, the 83 bent a little bit more in the direction of the 12 than you might have expected on the basis purely of the numbers. So what do you do about this group? What do you do with these individuals? What do you do with that perspective? How do you deal with them as Speaker?
You listen to them. You don't listen to them any more intently or any more with any more weight than you would any other member or any other caucus of group of individuals out there, but you listen to them.
Do you think they were listened to this last session?
I think they were heard. I think there's a difference between heard and being listened to and what comes out of that. I do think that they represented a constituency that had concerns very much lined up with sort of their principles as a Freedom Caucus.
Yep.
They ought to be heard. We ought to listen to them. Now, whether it resonates with me or not, as a representative from District 28, I can take myself into a position that whether it does or doesn't resonate with me. As Speaker, again, the importance is the integrity of the process, and they are elected by the same magnitude of constituents as I'm elected.
Yep.
And they deserve the opportunity to have what are their concerns and their issues get a fair shake in the House. And again, the fair shake can be pretty brutal at times,
Yeah.
but it works.
Would you be willing to bring one of their ranks into a position of leadership if you were to be elected Speaker on the order of the Godfather philosophy of keep your friends close and your enemies closer? Would it not be a good idea to try to bring someone from the Freedom Caucus into the team so that you at least have a direct line of communication and maybe some of what happens on the floor doesn't get to that point?
Right. Well, first of all, I wouldn't categorize them as my enemies at all.
No,
They're all my friends and
peace
and people that I really do enjoy a good, fun relationship with them. We don't agree on a lot of issues. I mean, there's no doubt we're just not in the same orbit on some of the issues. But the point is I do think that they ought to have that opportunity to be. I don't think whether somebody is put into a leadership role or something like that is as important as making sure that line of communication is
kept open.
Yes,
so there's a process to elect the Speaker that is under review right now by the Republican caucus. Correct. A vote was taken by the working group a couple days, a week ago, whatever it was, 2 weeks ago, to say we're going to now consider a bylaws change to allow the GOP caucus to anoint a candidate or to select a candidate, and then everybody's going to get in line behind this candidate and march out. Do you support the bylaws change, Mr. Chairman?
Well, I support the idea that the caucus should, really consider who the potential candidates are and potentially rally around somebody. But I would say the same of the Democrat caucus, that they should consider who is the person that they can rally around, because there's still obviously a very significant constituency out there in the House, and ultimately the Speaker is elected by the body as a whole.
You didn't answer my question. Do you support the bylaws change or don't you?
I will support whatever they end up going with.
So if the bylaws, changing the bylaws to have the caucus select a candidate and then get behind that candidate, if that comes up, you will vote yes in the caucus for that change?
Yeah, but it's not a binding, it's not anything that's held binding to.
Well, we'll come to the not binding part in a second.
Correct,
but
correct.
if the vote comes to change the bylaws, you will be a yes.
I'll be a yes for the caucus to rally around, however they define it. If it's through this bylaws change, then so be it.
Right.
But I will rally with the caucus to say, let's go through this process and think about what the pros and cons of the various people are that are running for Speaker. And let's do it. And again, I think it's a process that'll work. I think that it will vet the kind of candidate that at least that caucus wants, but it's not going to be in a vacuum. And that's the point that I want to make very clear. Just because the Republican caucus is going to do this doesn't mean that the Democrat caucus is marginated at all.
But even if the Democrats go from 55 to 60, let's just pick the over-under here at 5, right? So let's say they go to 60. Well, then they'll all march behind one choice at 60. But if the caucus actually picks one person and agrees to march behind that choice at 90, game over. So here's my question. Caucus picks a candidate for Speaker. I know you want it to be you. But let's assume it's not you. Will you pledge to support the choice of the caucus if it is not you?
I'm going to participate in that process, and I am going to be sure that that individual is going to work with all members of the body.
Yeah, I both heard you and listened to that answer, and that is, and that is not an answer, even remotely an answer.
What I will say this is, whatever process we come up with, it cannot and it must not marginate the Democrat caucus at the same time.
The only way that it would marginate the Democrat caucus, Mr. Chairman, is if you walk on the pledge to support the candidate. So if you don't want to enable the Democrats to choose the Speaker, agree to support the choice of the caucus.
The candidate, in my opinion, has to be willing and must demonstrate an ability to work across the aisle. I think that's a critically important part of whoever we pick as the Speaker. And I've demonstrated that many times over, both as the Chairman of Appropriations, Chairman of Higher Ed, and Chair of the Subcommittee on Health and Human Services.
You won't commit to it being binding?
No, I won't commit to it being binding.
Okay, so then that begs the question. If you won't commit to it being binding, if the caucus settles on a choice that you don't like, you would consider joining with the 60 Democrats to support an alternate to that choice.
Those are your words, not mine.
No, I know that. But if you notice, my voice went up at the end as a question. So what
does that mean?
I am asking you if you're not willing to make the caucus vote binding, and the choice of the caucus is somebody who you don't like, would you be willing to cross over and vote with the 60 Democrats for a candidate you would prefer rather than support the caucus choice?
Well,
would you commit to not doing that?
I'm going to say I'm not going to commit to anything right now, not knowing what the process is, what we ultimately agree on. But I think that what is incredibly important is that the Speaker candidate that is ultimately rallied around needs to be rallied around by both the Republicans and the Democrats. I think that's the way we get to an effective legislative body, and that needs to be considered as we go through this whole process.
You know that Mr. Chairman, you've been around a long time. You know that your fellow Republicans are going to take what you just said as Zerwas is going to walk on the Republican caucus choice.
No, I don't think so at all. I don't think that's the case at all.
Well, then you could just commit to binding your choice to the caucus's choice.
I believe that the caucus is going to come up with a very good choice of a candidate. I'd like for it to be me.
Right.
And I think I could be very effective in that role. And I could also reach out to the body as a whole and make Texas House incredibly effective.
If you knew, Mr. Chairman, that you could be elected Speaker with the votes of Democrats or the votes of the Freedom Caucus, which would you prefer? By the way, that was Ross's question.
Is that right? Did you send that over here?
It's a hell of a good question. I mean, I bow before the presence of greatness as far as that question goes. Which would you prefer?
I really haven't given it any thought, you know.
Oh, we have.
I guess you have. I guess you have, yes.
Yeah.
I probably don't have an answer for you on that.
Oh, Mr. Chairman, that's an answer. Let me tell you what, if you don't have an answer, that's an answer. The Democrats, there are litmus tests up and down the ladder here. The Democrats have said, not formally, but senior Democrats have said that there would be two litmus tests for them to support a Republican candidate for Speaker. One would be the Shafer Amendment vote, and the other would be vouchers. We know where you are on vouchers. You're a no vote on vouchers, so that passes as the Democrats' litmus test. Conveniently, during the vote for the Shafer Amendment, you were out of the room.
I was. We were
You
excused
were. So
for
you were excused
appropriations activities.
You were excused for appropriations. I am not going to excuse you. Would you have been a yes or a no vote on the Shafer Amendment?
Well, you know, I voted for the bill as it came out ultimately, and it did have the Shafer Amendment on there. As
did a number of the people who voted against the Shafer Amendment vote for the bill. In other words,
yes,
the people
correct,
who voted
correct.
against the Shafer Amendment did ultimately vote for the bill, so you'd be in the category with them.
Exactly.
What on the amendment specifically would you have done?
Right. I would have been a no vote on the amendment.
You would have been
and I expressed that publicly to many people in the body where the conversation came up.
Right.
And so I'm not going to, try to dance around that one with you and stuff, But I would have voted no, and I would have voted with the chairman.
Why would you have voted no?
Because I think that Chairman Guerin had worked out an agreement with this with our Democrat colleagues, and that I think that was a place where we felt that the body could rally around.
Yeah.
And very difficult bill. The whole bill was very, very difficult and really changed the whole temperature and environment of the House after that bill
But
passed.
not difficult enough for you to still vote for it.
Correct. I think it was an important issue in my district. I don't think specifically the Shafer Amendment was an important issue, but the issue in and of itself was important in my district, and so absolutely.
Are you concerned that your decision to say publicly that you would have voted against the Shafer Amendment could be a litmus test of sorts that you just failed with the Republicans?
Well, so be it. The point is that that's where I am on that issue. I have expressed that publicly to a lot of people, and in fact, if I was there, if we weren't out working on appropriations
you would have been a no vote.
I would have been a no vote, and I would have followed the chairman on that. And again, within my district, the issue is important, very important.
Yeah.
But on the amendment itself, again, I would have gone with the chairman.
So there are litmus tests and there are litmus tests. The Democrats would say maybe that they have two. Again, they haven't said officially, but they might say that they had two litmus tests. As I said, sanctuary cities, the Shafer Amendment specifically, and the voucher bill. The Republicans may have a litmus test of their own that they would want to get you to pass or fail. They may actually said you failed it, and that is Medicaid expansion. You know that when the discussion of your candidacy for Speaker came up, some began to bring back up HB 3791 from the 2013 session, which was your attempt to steer a course on Medicaid in a state where healthcare costs have been hockey sticking, as you know, where we have the most uninsured people, both as a percentage of our population and in raw numbers, than in any other state, where healthcare is becoming like one of those old horror movies, The Beast That Ate Cleveland. Everything else is getting crowded out of the budget by healthcare costs. This was the conservative read on your attempt to steer that course, which you insisted was not Medicaid expansion, you insisted was not an embrace of the Affordable Care Act. But this is what your conservative critics said at the time. HB 3791 seeks to find a Texas solution to Medicaid, a sugar-coated version of the Obama administration's proposal to dramatically expand a massive entitlement program, something that would cost the state billions of additional tax dollars in just a few short years. Zerwas' proposal is neither a solution nor good for Texas. This is the Empower Texas view. And I will stipulate that the Empower Texas view of the world is a narrow slice of the conservative end of the spectrum, but louder than not and more influential than not. How do you wire around that criticism as a litmus test of sorts?
Well, one, it's a great mischaracterization of that particular bill and what the effort was. Not surprised, if you look at anything they put on their website, you see a lot of mischaracterizations of people as well as bills they might have carried. What I wanted to make clear on that bill was that was not a bill to expand Medicaid under all these principles that were established by the Texas Public Policy Foundation, of which were a rider in the Senate budget under Senator Williams and his leadership. Came straight out of that, in fact, and we put it in the form of a bill.
Yeah.
And it was clearly the conversation between myself and Senator Williams at that time was, look, if they're going to go off and negotiate an expansion provision for Medicaid, I want to be sure the things that are important to us as conservatives are in that expansion consideration. Every one of them are out of the TPPF playbook.
Yep.
We didn't make them up. We took them, and we put them in a bill. And it has been exploded into a total mischaracterization, fake news, that this is something that Zerwas wants to expand Medicaid because he thinks Obamacare is the greatest thing.
Right.
Totally wrong. If you read anything that I've ever written, if you read the first page of the bill, it's a whole disclaimer on Obamacare.
Right. But you've heard the criticism.
I've heard it totally.
And you know that there are people who want to disable your candidacy through the Medicaid door.
And I accept that they're willing to take a total mischaracterization to do that. I will stand upon, what that bill was intended to do, what the source of it was, and our authorship of it, that, that was the reason we did that.
Yeah.
And so I would say today, it's not that much different than what Vice President Pence did in Indiana. It's almost exactly the same kind of a thing that they did up there, very conservative state, in an effort to try to draw down billions of dollars to the state. Yes, you're going to expand the Medicaid program, but you're also going to put a very significant financial jolt into the economy by a consequence of bringing back money, which we as a state tend to be a donor state anyway.
But you just again, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, but you just used the words, you would expand the Medicaid program. When you expand the Medicaid program, how is that not an expansion of Medicaid?
Well,
What's the distinction?
Okay, so it's what it looked like. The Medicaid program is a very restricted program from a federal point of view. Your arms are tied around what you can actually do in that program. What was proposed in that bill, which again comes out of the conservative proponents, is this, that these are the things that we think make for a better health care system. Whether it's Medicaid or not, it's a better health care system. And so, put these things into place. And then let's prove that it works. And then maybe we get what is, the holy grail among conservatives, that block grant for the entire Medicaid program.
Which you can spend as you choose.
Which I totally support.
Choose to.
Totally support
So
that.
if you become Speaker, will you bring this issue back up, or would you seek to have this issue brought back up by a chairman or by a committee of your choosing?
Well, what I would seek to do is to give the state more freedom in terms of managing its Medicaid program. Right. Whether it goes down the road of any kind of expansion opportunities, I think those have been cut off anyway, and fine, so be it, But I do think clearly that the state could run a better indigent health care program if we didn't have our hands tied as we currently do under the federal provisions.
Got it. Okay, we're going to go to questions from the audience now. I'm sure that there are many for the Speaker candidate. Please put your hands up. Agnes has a microphone and we'll walk it around to you. I see a question in the back, and then we'll come up front. Sir.
Hi. My question is on the economic competitiveness issue. Chairman Zerwas, during the special session, I testified in front of your committee about how from the end of World War II through 1994, primarily under the Democrats, state spending rose by about 10,000% in front of inflation plus population. Since 1994, primarily under the Republicans, state spending has risen by about 300% beyond inflation plus population. To what degree do you think overspending at the state and even more so the local level is a long-term threat to the economic competitiveness of the state?
Great question. I think that our last appropriations bill is a great reflection of the fact that we are not spending any more money in this current biennium than we spent in the last biennium. And I remember you coming to some of our hearings out there and appreciate that very much. But what we have done is, and I think this has been shown over at least the years that I've been involved in the appropriations process, is that we have really held the line in terms of total state spending. We've been able to grow a significant economic stabilization fund as a consequence of oil and gas revenues and stuff. And so we've built a cushion in there for ourselves, in the event that we have these ups and downs that's related to the oil and gas industry out there. So I think that the general principle that we as conservative has is to really make sure that we do everything we can to create efficiencies in our government process, in our agencies, and then limit the amount of taxpayer money that we have to use. I believe that's absolutely demonstrated in what we've done in our appropriations acts over the years.
As it relates to the rainy day fund, before we take this next question, on Harvey, you know, there's been a lot of discussion about, really we've migrated from whether to how much and when we're going to access the rainy day fund to somehow backfill the needs that are still coming into focus on Harvey. What is your perspective on how much of the rainy day fund you think we're going to need to draw down?
We're in the process of figuring that out. We have a hearing this week down in Corpus Christi. We had one in Houston a couple, 3 weeks ago. We're going to get our arms around what that's going to be. As you know, right now, that money is being provided through a variety of authorizations that the governor has to move money around within the agencies and so forth.
And then you're going to come back around and...
Then we'll come back, and what we'll have is a sizable supplemental bill that'll need to be passed. And my concern is that it might need to be passed in a more timely fashion than what we've done in the past. And so we're going to have to tap into other resources to do that. I think both the governor and the lieutenant governor have said that, you know, the ESF is in play for that. Otherwise, we just don't get.
It's going to be a pretty crappy session budget-wise, isn't it? It was already going to be a crappy session. It's looking crappier.
You know, I think we're gonna be doing okay, not great on revenue. I think we'll do okay, but we have some big holes that we planted for ourselves that we're going to need to deal with. You know, part of that is the state highway fund that we use to true things up this time. We're going to find that has to be paid up as we come back in addition to the regular funds that are going to go out, the $5 billion that goes out anyway. So, and then we put a big hole in Medicaid. You know, we always do that, but during this time where we're moving money around in order to meet the needs of people as a consequence of Harvey, that's going to grow. That's just kind of a piggy bank out there, and when we come back, we'll just figure out how much money we need to spend.
You're sure you want to be speaker? Be a hell of a session.
Be a great ride. Yeah. Be a great ride.
Ma'am.
So as Speaker of the House designates who the chairs of committees are, and I want to know whether you would appoint somebody to the redistricting committee who will call for hearings on bills that come before it.
We did have a case this session, Mr. Chairman, as you know, that where the Speaker appointed a chair of the redistricting committee who did not have one meeting or hearing, to the consternation of her vice chair.
Correct.
Who is now running for speaker, it appears.
Correct.
What would you do about that?
Well, so I think that, one, you know, obviously we're approaching that time where formally redistricting is going to occur. And so I do think that we need to have people that are willing to step up, hear the bills. And again, that's part of the process, is hear the bills and let
so
the whole
Representative
process
Burkett, Chairman Burkett should have had hearings?
That's totally her call, you know. But my perspective on it is that we appoint committees, we appoint chair of committees in order to hear bills that people bring forward, and let the process determine where it goes. You know, so if the chairperson doesn't see a need for a hearing on the variety of the bills, that is the power of the committee person, the chairperson.
I anticipated Mrs. Richards' question differently. I thought she was going to ask you if you would commit, as the Speaker did, to having Democratic chairs of committees. Will you?
You're not asking questions now.
No,
You're done with your questions.
I'm going to pull a Ronald Reagan on you. I paid for that microphone. You going to appoint Democratic chairs of committees?
I would.
Will you
yes,
commit?
I would appoint Democrats to chair of committees. I think that's in following of not only Speaker Strauss but Speaker Craddock. And so, yes, absolutely.
Ma'am.
Hi, my name is Shivada Saxena, and I really appreciate that you're going to hear and listen to all voices. As an Asian American and a new immigrant, you know, the conservative agenda concerns me because sometimes I don't even feel like I've been heard. For example, in the data that's published even by the population statistics, for example, there's Anglo, Black, Hispanic, but there's no Asian American. Have you heard of this before, and would you be willing to start counting us? Thank you.
I understand your frustration with that clearly, and the Asian American communication is growing in a very significant way. You know, I think all people in Texas are making great contributions to the greatness of the state of Texas, and the community that you represent should be included in that.
Questions? Here, sir.
I'd like to return to the economic competitive question here, the health of the Texas economy. Texas military installations in this state play a large role, significant role in the health of the economy. We're probably looking at a BRAC, a base realignment again. I don't think this has been given significant attention in the last few sessions as to how this could impact us going forward. Would you elevate this issue for the consideration I think it deserves?
And do you accept the premise of the question that this is a big issue that we should be focused on?
Oh, absolutely. I think, as far as the military goes and its impact on Texas overall, and certainly in terms of our economic competitiveness, that needs to be something that's part of the conversation when we talk about Texas staying in a very, very strong competitive position. And the veterans, make a huge, impact. The military personnel and the veterans make a huge impact to the state of Texas. Jim, you and I talked a bit about that, both just before this meeting as well as in previous times. So I appreciate your advocacy for the veterans. They do a wonderful, wonderful job. We owe so much to them, and as we approach Veterans Day, we certainly need to reflect on that. But I think that our whole military community needs to be thought of critically as a part of the success of the economy in the state of Texas.
Good. Any more? Ma'am, and then we'll come up to Mr. Stanley in the front. Ma'am.
Hi, I wanted to go back to the budget. You were supportive of using ESF, the rainy day fund, for education, among other things, a supplemental. You were also supportive of using the delayed payments in other areas than it was used in. It was suggested in the last Senate Finance hearing, thank goodness we didn't do the delayed payment to the Foundation Schools program or use the rainy day fund for that because we have it now. Do you have a response?
Right, that was right away when people said we need the rainy day fund for Harvey, the response was, well, it's a good thing we didn't listen to some of those big spending liberals who wanted to drain the rainy day fund, or we wouldn't even have that option. What do you think about that?
Well, first of all, I would say to the extent that the House was recommending the use of the ESF to balance up the $2.5 billion, we voted that out with well over 100 votes. It was seen as a place that we could get that money without having other needs to pay it back and so forth, and it would have still left $9 billion in the bank, So we would have left the rainy day fund very, very healthy to deal with the circumstance that we have today. It would have in no way compromised our ability to address the needs that are out there.
Well, why not? If you had that much less in the rainy day fund account, you would have less money to spend on the stuff that's happened since.
But the truth of it is that the magnitude of this can only be met with federal dollars. The magnitude of this impact is approaching $200 billion.
So the 90% piece on the federal side is really the crucial piece.
That's the crucial piece. And I'm all for the way that the governor and the leadership is handling this right now, is that let's not jump into this and use this money when we can find the money elsewhere, which is what they're doing. They're doing it very effectively, in fact. They can find the money to get us through the most critical needs that we have out there. If we had a critical need that wasn't being addressed by federal monies coming in, and we as the legislature needed to come in and to mobilize some of that rainy day money for that very specific purpose, I feel very comfortable that the governor would call that session. But my conversations with him have been that, I think that we can find the money in various pockets, and then let's just true it up in the supplemental, which all leaders have said we're going to have to tap into the rainy day fund to do that. But to have gone ahead and used that $2.5 billion, I think it would have made it a lot easier going into this next session to not have to true up certain things because of state highway funds that have to be met and other things out there.
So if you go into the next session and you have a conversation about school finance, whether you're speaker or not, and there is a desire to put more money into public education, but the money is not in GR, will you go back to that well again? Will you be an advocate again for using the rainy day fund to or a delayed payment to somehow increase the amount of money into public ed?
It has to be in the mix. We have to have that conversation. I think that the public, and rightly so, will be very, very frustrated if we don't live up to our obligations in education and have a pot of money of that size sitting there that could be used to help bolster that up in the event that the economy isn't generating the revenue that we would otherwise put there. And so the ESF, and I've had this conversation many times, was originally put in place as a consequence of the oil bust in the late 80s. It was put there because we had concerns about the up and down of the oil and gas revenue, its impact on employment, its impact ultimately on sales tax, and using that money to kind of smooth all that out. That got lost somewhere.
There's been a
And-
mythologizing that's happened in the last couple
Well,
of years.
there has been a change in the narrative around it, so to speak, as to what it really is there for.
Yeah.
I am of the position it's there to help us meet the important needs of Texas in the event that our economy goes up and down. When the economy's up, we're going to continue to build this thing. It's going to be there for the purposes that we have available. Yes, it's there now for might be some critical needs related to the storm. There's no doubt about it. It's a storm of all historic times.
You know that the Senate would say in response to this, if the Senate were here as a person, the Senate would say, if you wanted more money in public education last session, all you had to do was take that modest pilot program for special needs students on school choice. Should you have done that, and would Speaker Zerwas be willing to make that deal?
Not at this point, no.
No, okay. That was a straight answer, I like it. Mr. Stanley.
Dr. Zerwas, in 2014, the maternal mortality rate was measured at 35.8 maternal deaths for every 100,000 live births, and that was described as the worst in the developed world. As a medical professional, what, in your opinion, are the factors contributing to this horrible situation? And as a state leader, what can the legislature and the state of Texas do about this?
Great, thank you. Great question, and one that is, I think, top of mind for all of us, whether we're in the medical profession or not. What we have done in the most recent session is to authorize a group to study and do the deep dive on this. There has been a lot of work towards determining why are we seeing this rate. Is there anything from a public policy point of view that has generated that? And are there things that we need to change from a public policy point of view in order to try to bring it back into what would be considered a much more normal level? I don't think it's as I understand it and I've read about it, I don't think that it's a singular issue, that it's actually multiple issues out there, and it's not just the immediate peripartum time. It actually goes beyond that period of time. It's not all related to postpartum depression. But that is part of what's there, and is there a way that we can be sure to intervene and make sure that somebody finds the needs that they have in that regard? We passed a bill that would allow pediatricians to do a very quick mental health well-being check on mothers when they bring their child back in for well care and checkups and things like that. They may not come in for themselves, but they will come in for their child, and that opportunity should be made available. And if pediatricians are doing that, then they should be paid for doing that. That may be part of what we need to look at in terms of helping to rein some of these things in. But I don't think it's any single specific thing. Some of it's related to drug abuse. Some of it is related to certain, clinical conditions that people get, hypertension, diabetes, and things of that nature and stuff. So I think the best thing that we can do is keep it top of mind, keep the committee that's been authorized to do the deep dive into it, to continue to look and try to ferret this out. And to the extent that we, from a public policy point of view, need to change some things to be sure that these women get the kind of care that they need to get, then we need to seriously look at it. And I have every bit of confidence that that will come out of the committee that has been appointed.
Ross is going to get the last question. This is as rare as the speaker voting from the chair.
Well,
Go ahead.
This is a phone-in question from the far reaches of Northeast Tarrant County, a long-time listener, first-time caller named, who, as Evan likes to say, his name rhymes with Jonathan Stickland. Ask if he endorses all Freedom Caucus reps for re-election and if he will be involved in primaries in March.
Great question. Would you endorse all Freedom Caucus reps for re-election, and will you get involved in March primaries?
Right. I'm not involved in any of the March primaries. I certainly am willing to step up and
Except your
help
own.
except my own, yes. Step up and help my colleagues get reelected to the extent that they've been part of helping us do the right things for the state of Texas.
So if
Again,
Matt Shafer asked you to endorse him against Ted Camel, you'd do it?
well, I'm not going to get into endorsing anybody on that, but
If Matt Shafer asked you to endorse Ted Camel, would you do it?
no.
So you're not going to even support your colleagues who are in contested primaries? You're not going to take an friendly incumbent rule, none of that stuff?
I would take a position of helping my colleagues, get reelected to the extent that they need some help. They may not need help. In fact, some people would say, Zerwas, stay out of this. That's the most help you can give me. So.
Okay. All right, good. Mr. Chairman, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Look
Appreciate
forward to
it.
having you
Look
again.
forward to it.
Please give Chairman Zerwas a hand. Thank you.
Thank you.
Always appreciate it.
Oh,
Thank you very
thank you.
much.
Thank you.
Very
guys.
fun.
Good
Thank you.
question. Good question.
We'll see you again. Thank you.
Appreciate it.